So welcome to the next in our series of short video interviews with our senior HR leadership, where I ask what's next post-COVID-19. Very much talking about moving this forward. You know, it's all about looking forward, building back better, transformational organisational change, etc. So delighted today to say that we've got Sarah Kirby, who is the Group Head of Organisational Design at Zurich Insurance Company. So hi, Sarah.
Hello, hi Peter, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and thanks
Good.
for giving me some time today. So Sarah, just probably for everyone really, just give us a little flavour, I guess, to start of you, your role at Zurich, and perhaps some little responsibilities and some facts about Zurich. That'd be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter. So yes, Sarah Kirby, working for Zurich Insurance. I joined Zurich in January 2019, having done a long stint in the UK, predominantly within the banking sector in senior HR business partnering roles, predominantly in investment banking. And then I went to join Zurich to quite a different role, actually, but it's been really, really exciting during these times. So in terms of the response, Peter, around my remit there, I look after a whole raft of things, really, ranging from organisational design, broader HR transformation and strategy, which encompasses all the elements of future of work, which no doubt we'll touch on today. I look after the analytics space for HR, budgets, HR technology, and then more recently I now have responsibility for more broader employee experience and our employee listening strategy. So on the one axis, I feel it's this eclectic mix of things, but interestingly, there's a massive join up in all of these elements, which I think has become much more pronounced actually during and as we come out of the pandemic, which again, I'm sure we'll touch on today. So hopefully that's provided you with a little bit of a flavour.
That's great, Sarah. And I think last time I saw was about 55,000 employees in Zurich. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. I think I got about 215 countries and territories. So it's a sizable global, impact.
Correct.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. So we touched, obviously we've got to touch on COVID, but so let's really just jump in there and say, really ask what have been the main challenges, I guess, for Zurich during the pandemic. Now, I know we're kind of through, hopefully the worst of it, but just give us a flavour of what it's been like.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great question, actually, to kick us off today, Peter, in that, just a bit of context setting in that we know that the world's pandemic response has resulted in the most rapid organisational transformation in the world of work. And as part of this, with working from home as the new normal, we see virtual working requires a fundamentally new digital operating model. And we know that we've been catapulted some 5-10 years fast tracking the future of work drivers, which include automation, digitalization, innovation, ways of working, and interestingly, customer behaviors and expectations. And if I start with that context in terms of the challenges, the first one I would respond to is that of technology, which has been very topical for us all, right? In response to the pandemic at Zurich, the transition was really, really smooth. And literally within 24 hours of being in a home office situation, we were able to operate seamlessly. What we had done, leading up to the pandemic, clearly the investment in that had paid off. Building on this aspect, we had to completely switch into home working, and we felt well prepared. We'd had a big emphasis on flex work programs and some previous investments in our technology infrastructure. There have been concerns, clearly, as many other HR practitioners and business leaders have spoken about, which is the extent to which, when one is remote working, how connected we can be or not. And the interesting thing for us was technology, whilst being a challenge, we overcame those challenges, as I've said. And actually, via our more formal and informal employee inputs, we have found that employees have said they felt more connected than ever during this time, which is quite interesting, actually, having pivoted ourselves to such a different way of working quite suddenly. But, to answer as well on the challenge front, we, like many organisations, have really been concerned about potentially the use of video meetings, as we're in one right now, and what many of us are referring to as this digital fatigue. And we see that a lot of literature is being kind of drafted around this topic as we speak. Very recently, Peter, I was reading an article by Microsoft where they had pulled together some analytics from their workplace analytics suite. And there's some interesting, facts and figures in terms of people using Teams, Microsoft Teams, and meetings on those channels increasing by 148%. Weekly Teams chat increasing by 45%, people using documents and the Office document suite moving up by 66%. So, these are all challenges that we continue to encounter as people are working within this kind of remote situation. Other challenges to touch on, which I'm sure are very similar for other organizations, well-being of our people. That certainly was something that we saw as the forefront, as the pandemic started in earnest. Without question, we knew that we were entering very turbulent times. And for us, it was about how can we place that focus and the care and support needed, not just for our employees, but also for our broader customer network. And I'm sure we'll talk on broader well-being as we move forward through the conversation, but that's certainly been seen as one of the challenges that we continue to keep an eye on. Then there's the whole piece around how do we provide employees with the levels of flexibility, and indeed running parallel with that, the manager capability piece. I think on the flexibility, there's some really refreshing insights here. And I give you some examples in that many people had to really think about very quickly childcare arrangements. How would they cope in this remote working with all of the work-life balance challenges, right? And we within Zurich, and just the same as many other institutions, had a whole suite of policies, right, related to this topic. But what was refreshing was the fact that we said, sometimes let's ditch the policy, put that to the side for the moment, and really think about what makes sense for our people. And I found that, and many others, so refreshing. Then, similarly, to support all of that, we recognized early on that managers were challenged in operating within this environment. And therefore, we really started to double down on the tools, the training that we could provide managers to deliver through these rather turbulent times. And people have been really appreciative of that. And one of the call outs that I would say has really worked was, as part of that management training, we've introduced peer-to-peer coaching. And that people have found to be hugely value add. And I would say that, and I'm sure that we'll come to this as we canter through the conversation, there's so many positives coming out of this pandemic in terms of things that we've built quickly in an agile fashion, which managers and employees are seeing that there's really an element of longevity to what we've built for the future. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of a pen picture to start us off around some of the challenges.
Yeah, I think you made some good points. I think the obviously technology, you were probably in a very good place, like many sort of corporates in finance especially. So that's been good, and I think that made it much more easier. And as we all know, companies moved, they did, in weeks what they would do in 10 years, so it's been quite incredible to see. I love the point. Yeah, you're right. Managers having to manage in a different way suddenly remotely when they haven't got their teams there. So that's been a challenge for many. And I think, have you seen also, and you mentioned a little bit there about kind of, policies have been changed and just doing what's right at that point in time. And what about over-engineering? Have you found that you've been looking at the kind of processes and, everything that everyone does? And because I think often there's a sense of over-engineering because we've been complacent and everything's been going well.
Totally. I mean, Most definitely. There are a raft of examples of things that we've done in such an agile fashion, during this pandemic. And to your point around over-engineering, it's like us all, right? When we're suddenly met with challenges that we're faced with, which we need to deal with in the here and now, one's mindset, one's behaviors, one's way in which one operates is remarkable. It's fundamentally different.
Yeah.
And I think as we trail through the conversation, and I have these conversations even at a personal level with people where people talk a lot about the pandemic and the challenges. And, all of us have found this very difficult. But I am a person who always likes to see the upside and the positive elements of it. And the world of work, as we will trail through and talk about, has changed fundamentally. And these are some of the positive elements, right?
Yeah, I think we are both on the same pathway, aren't we? We love the positivity of it all, when we've been through such challenging times. So let's move on. Absolutely, because it's about change. So let's look at kind of, I guess, some of this learning, because this has all been about learning as well. And I guess what has this helped enabled you to sort of create change? What do you see of those changes going forward for Zurich?
Indeed. I mean, some of the initiatives that we implemented, and there are so many of them, what I tried to do was just think about ones that we could select which maybe resonate in terms of the here and now. Was one of the actions that we took was Zurich's hospitalization benefit policy, which has provided additional support to Zurich employees in the event of hospitalization linked to COVID. And, talking earlier, Peter, about the pace and the agility, right? This we brought in within the space of 10 days. The concept was conceived, scrutinized, worked into a formal initiative and rolled out. And that for our employees was pretty remarkable in that, that was something that we extended to families as well. And that then really dialed up this whole piece around caring, around support. And I'm sure we'll touch on that later in terms of some of the things like this, which have strengthened the proposition that we have in place going forward. Another example in that, we talked about the raft of training and awareness that we've provided for managers, but also for employees, focusing very much on health and well-being practices. We launched an online source for all our employees called Zurich Never Stops that really turned into an internal movement, including webinar series featuring weekly experts in mental health, staying active, nutrition, and other key areas. And those are all things that, pre-pandemic were seen to be important as we focus on well-being, and we'll talk about that as we trail through. But, we really dialed up some of these things. And I'm someone who always looks for the proof points in what we're doing. And so just to bring that to life, we have a very strong listen and act strategy within Zurich, really trying to get the inputs from our employees as to how they're feeling, what are their views on things. And what was really interesting is that when we ran our ENPS survey in 2020, we saw that the feedback and the results were the highest in 2020, reinforcing this care and support element during the pandemic. Building on that, we saw a significant increase in our Organisational Health Index score, which really speaks volumes in terms of how we managed this whole situation and the extent to which we have strengthened our platform, our proposition going forward. Another initiative which, without question, has gathered momentum is this whole emphasis on communication. I think organizations talk about this extensively, but I think one of the things for me within Zurich was the extent to which our senior leadership really grasped the nettle around this, and in doing so thought about how are we going to engage our organization differently through an array of channels, town halls, informal coffee chats, all kinds of things to create this element of closer connectivity and support. And I think, again, talking about longevity, these are things now that people are feeling to be very natural, which before had much more of a formal element to it. it was always about, we talk about business, we talk about strategy, and we still do that. But of course, there are now many other elements to it, some of which are truly fun, and people finding out much more about people in a very informal kind of setting, which I think people have appreciated. So, you know, those are just a couple of initiatives in terms of the learns and the things that we've really felt proud of. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense.
Yeah, and I think many of these interviews do exactly that. They do this whole piece about communication, listening, two-way communication, which is really important. And as you say, I look into the window into everyone's home. They're all working remotely, and this care piece has come through, and this empathy, which has been great to see. So let's talk. So obviously, well-being, we just broached that a little bit there. Lots of talk at the moment about, you know, a kind of well-being crisis, as it were, because after post-COVID, you know, mental health issues, burnout, some of the things you already talked about in terms of this more tech, remote, hybrid working route, whichever companies are going. So give us a flavour about what you're doing, I guess, with your wellbeing strategy and plans you've set for the future.
Absolutely, and that's a great segue in, Peter, as you say, about the literature and the concerns around this topic, right, are just so prevalent in our day-to-day operating and discussions. And, you know, we in Zurich have very much focused on the mental well-being of our teams, and really thinking about that in different ways in terms of how do we equip managers and employees with the right tools and the right techniques and the right coaching, such that we can provide our employees with something different. And this has been reinforced with a whole suite of webinars which have been made available to our employees really at pace. You know, we recognize that the pandemic, and in many jurisdictions, you know, are still going through lockdown, the extent to which this is having an adverse effect on employees' well-being, but not just our immediate employees, but their broader families, broader society. And so to that end, one of the things that we've really done is expand our mental health offering. We have a lot more tailored counselling, big emphasis on employee assistance programs. And we're really monitoring the extent to which employees are taking advantage of that, which I think will be all important. And again, many of these things were in place pre-pandemic, but I think now the emphasis on them is quite significant. And then another interesting kind of angle to this is that very recently we've launched quite an innovative, creative approach. It's known as Global Live Well by Zurich proposition, which is really positioned to accelerate and scale existing health and well-being solutions. And it's designed to provide our employees with unique and personalized services around their kind of health and well-being, in that it's a data-driven service. So one obtains the information about one's well-being through kind of wearing of an app, so to speak. And in doing so, it offers a lot of preventative type measures in terms of whether it's monitoring one's blood pressure, one's heart rate, all kinds of things that, you know, are much more innovative than perhaps some of the other type of well-being programs. And look, it's not for everyone, but something that has been really well received and something that we're piloting in a number of our geographies. And then very interestingly, we're offering such a proposition to our customer base also. Yep.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see how this goes. But the feedback thus far has been really, really positive in terms of us thinking much more innovatively within this space. So let's see, I guess.
What a great way, you know, this whole thing about marketing to our clients and our customers.
Absolutely.
You're actually reversing that trend in a funny sort of way on, because there's, you know, there is lots of talk of actually doing that for our employees and the people who work for you.
Yes.
And so I like that. I think, and again, just, I know you touched on that briefly, but that sort of take up, because there is this kind of fear, isn't it, factor with data's involved and personal sort of. So how's that been? You mentioned a little bit. What sort of percentage, if you put it across the whole workforce, or what sort of take-up have you had?
It's at this moment being piloted, so it's literally just launched. So over the coming weeks, months, then we'll be able to look at what the take-up and the interest is. So we don't have the facts and figures at our fingertips at this moment, but it'll be interesting to revisit and see how this takes off, Peter. Be delighted to update in due course, but yeah, I think it's an interesting extension to our existing proposition for sure.
Yeah, and you know, it started off with apps, didn't it? Phones, you know, and so people are kind of much more involved in their health. So it's a good timing. Okay, great. So let's move on a little bit then in terms of, you know, a lot of this now is around people and culture, isn't it? And I think we're seeing a trend of, you know, even human resources kind of being pushed aside, and it's all about people and people experience. You said employee experience as well. So again, I guess just let's have a little look at people and culture priorities for you for 2021 and beyond. So what are you thinking there?
I mean, I think one of the things that we've been really focused on, even pre-pandemic, you know, we made very firm commitments in our work sustainability, future of work space, right? And in doing so, a big, heavy emphasis on creating the right levels of transparency for employees around where they have skill gaps, not just in terms of their current remit, but in terms of future state skills. As we know, with the acceleration of digitalization, etc., what does that mean in their day-to-day working life, and how do we equip them with the tools, the techniques, the skilling for the future? So building this learning organization is absolutely paramount to us, and was actually pre-pandemic. And as a result of that, what we've seen is a real acceleration around our approach and our thinking within that. Just to bring that to life, Peter, as the pandemic hit, you know, we thought about how do we think in terms of rapid reskilling of our employees where it makes sense to do so. And what we found was that in a number of the geographies, there were parts of those geographies where the businesses needed additional resource to cope with client queries, etc. So how do we offer people that rapid reskilling to pivot them into the spaces where the businesses needed them most? And we had huge success around that. We've placed a massive emphasis on internal hiring of our employees and really prioritizing that for our internal workforce, right, via reskilling and broader mobilization of our people. And interestingly, in the pandemic, right, this gathered momentum quite significantly. And I said earlier about proof points and measurement. And just to bring that to life, in Q1 of 2020, the internal hiring numbers were tracking at roughly 40%. At Q4 of 2020, the numbers of our employees gaining jobs through internal hiring had increased to 53%, showing the uptick in terms of internal mobilization. So we've really grasped this whole concept of developing internal marketplaces, right? And I think what's really interesting in this, what we've done is mobilized our people not just into permanent roles, but also part-time assignments where people are saying maybe they have 20% capacity, 30% capacity, or whatever that might look like. And it's another way in which we think about reskilling and development of our people, right? So there's a huge piece around that. Wellbeing is a big focus for us. You know, I talked about the fact that we have a very strong listen and act strategy within Zurich, and in doing so, we're really keen to understand within segments of our organisation the views of people and how we encourage much more bottom-up thinking in terms of scoping and shaping our interventions as we move forward. And so within that, you know, we're thinking about an even more progressive employee listening strategy, such that we're not looking at the data after the survey has happened and we're compiling and consolidating, but how do we bring in much more kind of pulsing nudges within the organization, looking at different segments of the workforce where they have different needs, and then how do we need to adjust our strategy accordingly? And I guess, you know, turning as well to the work sustainability piece, one of the things that we have huge interest in within Zurich is this whole kind of segment of society being the youth. In that, you know, we've read the literature during the pandemic, and oftentimes this segment of society really being referred to as the lost generation.
Yeah.
And it's about how do we in Zurich give something back in that regard. We have some fantastic apprenticeship programs running around the world, whether that be, you know, in the US, in the UK, in Switzerland, in Germany, but how do we think more so where relevant to have more of an enterprise-wide approach, thinking about disadvantaged communities? So we have a whole kind of strategy and approach being developed, and the thinking thereof as we speak, given that there are so many inputs that we really want to consider as we're thinking about building this more sustainable workforce as we move forward. So hopefully that provides you with a flavour. No,
I think that's really, again, some of the things when I do these interviews that come out is purpose. And I think so many have found purpose throughout, which is fantastic. And I know you know, you've got the Zurich Community Trust, you were doing things before, don't get me wrong, but there's a real focus on that community. And as you say, you know, absolutely. So I love some of that. And I think you touched on it as well, because I think it's quite obvious, data, you're pretty hot on that, and I think you're very much turning that dial up to predictive, you know, data totally. Now, and how, and I love that as well. So, totally. You know, I think it's very exciting for the future. I think there's so many things. It's such an exciting time. I keep saying this in HR. So, and you're definitely showing that, Sarah. Okay, great. So finally, then we're nearly at a point we wrap this up, Sarah. But let's talk to you as a senior HR leader or a senior people leader, and just what's it been like for you? Because as we said, it's over a year now since this started, and how have you found the whole journey so far? And just give us a personal experience from you, really. Absolutely.
Well, hopefully it's come across. I always tend to be a positive character, always seeking the opportunities. We know with any crises there are challenges, and there are things which we will find difficult to overcome. But one of the things that I've really loved working for Zurich within this time is the extent to which the organisation has provided this element of care, support, reassurance, and almost this kind of can-do attitude to just get things done. And for me, what's really resonated, we've known this all along, but the pandemic has really focused on the extent to which one needs to have that level of camaraderie, joined up thinking, agile thinking, making things happen real time to address issues. And I'm hoping what's come across in our conversation is that my reflection is this pandemic has created so many opportunities for us, both as HR practitioners and business leaders going forward, in that we have a chance to pivot away from standardized processes and prescriptive ways of doing things to become much more flexible, much more innovative, much more creative, and really involving our employees in our decision making and our shaping of ideas as we move forward. And, you know, I always regard myself as a leader who has been very focused on the well-being of one's team. For however many years I've managed teams. But for me, going forward, there is a heavy emphasis day to day on getting the work done is all important, of course. But first and foremost, it has to be on the well-being, the ways in which people are feeling, the ways in which we as an organisation can help them. And I think, you know, we as leaders need to look ourselves in the mirror every day and ensure that we're giving that back to our people in order that we can create this sustainable workforce. You know, me personally, you know, there's no question I have found on occasions this whole transition to be challenging, both personally and professionally. But, you know, it gives you that insight into who you are and the resilience that you have. And I'm actually very thankful to have had an experience like this, such that we're able to trial new things and actually enhance the world of work. Because I think to close off, we're all talking about this hybrid operating environment and what it will mean. And, we in Zurich are saying all of the while, this will be a test, a refine process. We won't have everything right the first time, but it provides us with some great opportunities, I think. So I feel very positive and very excited about the future. And I think, going forward, we certainly have some really rich ideas and inputs to work with.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, Sarah. I think this agility piece has been incredible, and trialing different things, testing, knocking them not on the head or moving on, and it's just been really exciting. So it's been fascinating to talk to you today, really positive. So thank you for that. And
pleasure.
I'll just sign off by saying thanks everyone, but catch up next time when I speak to another senior HR leader, and as we build back better, as we like to say. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Have a good day, Peter. Thank you.